there was a phenomenal article that was out here. I was reading, and I can't find it. Of course. Actually, I think that was a pretty good email.
Sources are never there when you want them.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Terrible. I mean, entirely true, but terrible.
The world we live in.
Al, you in the Jayville office?
Oh yeah, I've got the Held Boys actively working on some stuff to get shipped out.
The Hell Boys.
So the Held Boys, Will and Travis.
Oh, the Hell Boys. I said the Hell Boys. That Hell works too, I guess.
Well, you thinking I'm like Immortal Joe over here or something like that? those are War Boys, yeah.
I didn't think things were that bad up in Jayville, but you know. Welcome back to OT After Hours, a podcast about industrial cybersecurity, why it matters, and all of the challenges that it presents. Before we dive into the topic today, probably go around and introduce ourselves, or at least say hello. We have a couple of voices on today, one returning and one new. So breaking with my tradition of going just across the screen, I'm actually going to invite Ryan Zahn. Why don't you say hello and introduce yourself a little bit first?
Hey, hello. I'm excited to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here. I've been at Verve now for a little over 11 years. So I run our customer success department here, which is a fancy term for helping our customers with our product and, you know, using the data and finding new use cases for it that are out there. And my background's in OT. I was a SCADA engineer for a number of years at a power utility here in the Midwest. So yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And returning again, we have Tyler Bergman. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me back. Yeah,
and of course, continue.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so most of you can probably already know me from prior episodes and all that. So I've been doing utility engineering for quite some time, for about the last 20 years, and I've been spending about the last 5 years with Verve, helping everybody out with cybersecurity efforts.
Absolutely. I'm Ken Kully, heading up Verve's system support group. It's kind of the new thing they have me doing lately, which kind of puts me a little bit more into, you know, the same wheelhouse as Ryan, but differently so, because, you know, whereas Ryan is working with like all the data visualizations and sort of really helping the customers maximize the utility of the Verve product. You know, I'm the one now who's kind of supporting his team and then supporting the operations team by going in sort of behind the scenes and doing any troubleshooting that our customers need, at least as pertains to the, you know, the Verve software itself and sort of the interoperability components that are all there. So I'm calling this episode 4 of the podcast, but it's going to get released out of band rather than sort of wait for the usual monthly cadence to bring us around to the middle of August. It seemed worthwhile to have you can call it a very special episode of sorts to discuss the rather impactful events that happened last Friday, or I guess a couple of Fridays ago by the time this episode comes out. Of course, I mean the Crowdstrike driver push or configuration push that took down some large number of Windows endpoints around the globe, very prominently in a number of regulated industries. And maybe we'll touch on the reasons behind that. Maybe we won't. I don't know. But I do have to give credit where credit is due, which is to Ryan for suggesting this topic and for suggesting the urgency. I had actually thought about doing this as the August episode, but it does make more sense to put something out there while the memory is still fresh. Yep. So, yeah, last Friday was interesting.
Definitely. Yep. Just seemed like mass chaos everywhere. Woke up and I was like, what's going on out here? Yeah, all this thing called Crowdstrike. Yeah.
Which we use like internally, right. I mean, on the IT side.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm not going to toot my own horn. I had a Mac. I didn't really have a problem, but yeah. I heard it was quite the mess. I know there's one of our customers has, and I never really heard from them, but I'm sure they were dealing with their own stuff that day. But
yeah, I mean, I've got a Windows endpoint. You know, my work PC is a Windows PC, but like weirdly, I didn't get hit. Or if I did, I was one of the lucky ones where like it ended up in the boot loop, but then it self-resolved because it was essentially a race condition, right? And as long as, you know, if the CrowdStrike driver was a little slow in coming up and Windows was a little quick in coming up, then it could, in theory, like things could just, the stars could align just right, and it would grab like the rollback,
Right.
and then like that would stop things flat. Either that, or it's because I might have had a VPN left on. I'm not sure. So we couldn't even hit like the update. I couldn't even hit the update server because I had been like doing so much client work the night before, and I might have just forgotten to hit a disconnect button. I'm not sure, but either way, my laptop wasn't affected. But oh man, so much of the rest of the quote office unquote.
Mm-hmm. I was at I think I was at a store that afternoon, and they had one of their displays up there had the big blue screen of death on it, and I was like, oh, there's another one. So yeah, a little scary though, to be honest. Just you kind of think about it.
Yeah,
and it's widespread is what it was too, right?
Right.
It's just kind of interesting. Well, I was kind of one of those lucky ones. I still had my laptop in my bag from just coming home the night before, and one of my associates called me up. I was like, "Hey, have you been seeing the news and all the stuff on Teams and everything going on?" It's like, "Oh man, he just woke me up here." So it's like, yeah, I'm like open up my laptop and everything. After I like check my Teams message and saying like, "Oh yeah, it's safe to open your PCs now." It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm in the clear. So open mine up. I was in the clear, but my associate, he had the blue screen of death on his machine. So I think it was one of those where he left the machine on all night. And, I think the way that the update structure had worked for CrowdStrike and just updates periodics out there. And this is one of the portions that's part of their update mechanism as far as like new detections and things of that nature. Had that null pointer reference in there and just kind of the endless soup or whatever. I'm like, wow, So they're from our perspective, there was a lot of other things kind of interior to us as far as, Verve being a portion of Rockwell, because traditionally in the past, our segment of Verve itself, I don't think we've ever really evaluated CrowdStrike because we've always seen that as more of an IT-focused utility for EDR and things of that nature, where we go on to more static style of systems like WoW listing and things of that nature for our OT environments, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's and it's funny too because going back in time into previous careers I've had. The whole concept of security software in an OT environment has always been a bit fraught. Anyways, I can think of, honestly, the only implementation I ever really liked was a McAfee product. Don't hate me. McAfee Move was a really, really smart solution. I think it was called Move at any rate. And essentially it was how you could do McAfee endpoint security managed with EPO, like ePolicy Orchestrator, in a virtual environment. And the idea was that alongside everything else running in your virtual environment, you ran this customized Linux VM that ran the full version of, McAfee endpoint protection, enterprise, whatever. And then it used some specialized VMware stuff. The name, the exact term eludes me, but it essentially allows like VMs to pass information back and forth through the hypervisor under certain tightly controlled situations. Why can't I think of what it was called? But the whole point was you basically ran like a very stripped down move agent on your operator workstations if they were virtualized. But then you had this, other VM over here that was running the full version of McAfee. So it was the one that took the performance hit whenever McAfee was doing like huge scans or updates or whatever else. And then the agents were basically just passing traffic back and forth. They're passing data back and forth. So you got all the benefits of, that endpoint protection with a little bit of latency, but not like a latency that was perceptible to the user. It was sort of more on the back end, right? If you had a file that was going to generate some kind of alert, it might take a couple of extra seconds to generate the alert. Now, that can still be the difference between, depending on exactly what kind of malicious software it is, that can still be ages. But in terms of like minimizing the impact on OT systems, this was one of the better solutions I've seen, where it was essentially just, pushing the performance hit off to one particular device that was never going to be part of your mission critical stuff. And then, using these advanced virtualization tools to sort of broker communications between all the different virtual machines. Very, very clever, but I don't think they make it anymore. I think they discontinued it several years ago now. Pity, because like I say, it was the only one that I really, really cared for. But yeah, I mean, doing any kind of endpoint protection in an OT environment is challenging, to say the least. And not least of which, not just the performance hit that can sometimes result, but also the, if you have anything that is dependent on cloud access, good luck, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't even know what cloud means in OT.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it should stay that way.
Yeah, it may. I mean, it's, I really think that this, whenever it comes to our customers or really any, OT practitioner, they're usually, getting pushed from the top. We need to do something right now for, antivirus or EDR or whatever your, buzzword is. But, I think this is going to really open up some people to, okay, maybe we should think about, what is all the background that communication and things that occur, right? Because I mean, from what I read, they do have like an N-1, N-2 setup in Crowdstrike where you can delay agent rollouts, but not necessarily signature rollouts. And a lot of people kind of don't think about the signature side of it really ever causing a major issue like this. But in OT, that's, this is one of those things where, it's detrimental, right? Versus, hey, my whole business is down, obviously. But if you're, manufacturing facility, at least we're still producing. If we were, doing those types of phased rollouts or phased updates.
It really depends too on like the nature of, like you say signature update, but that isn't really quite what this was. Like, and in theory, actually, this was in terms of what was actually being pushed out, it was very innocuous because it was kind of like a definitions update, but also just sort of like an optimization, right? Like it was really just a very minor, it was supposed to be a very, very minor thing that just got pushed out. But also the way the CrowdStrike platform works, right? Because it's not like, it's not your typical AV signatures, right? The CrowdStrike model is different than that, right? Because they're actually trying to, get down to the kernel level and sort of stop the idea being that, you're stopping malware before it can even like light off its persistence mechanism, whether that's a service or a driver or whatever the case may be, right? You're at the kernel level, stopping stuff before it even launches, which is awesome from, as a concept. But, and in this case, it was ultimately, it came down to, every programmer's nightmare, the null pointer reference.
Right.
The file that got pushed out basically had null data, which, the driver read in and attempted to utilize, and null pointer exception, crash, which, if it's if that happens in Microsoft Word, well, okay, Microsoft Word crashes to desktop and you lose whatever you hadn't saved, but you just launch it again and you keep going. When that's something at the kernel level, that's literally like booting up a second before your OS boots up. That's a very different problem. Which
one of the other things I want to bring up too. So here's the thing. So one of the things that, there's a little bit of misconception out there, and I kind of want to quote like a Stan's like news article out here that was sent out just recently, and it was their July 23rd newsletter that came out. And one of the things that really resonated with me when I was reading through it, there's the headline of CrowdStrike, risk of consolidation. So, when you're talking about consolidation, it's like consolidating of tooling throughout the ecosystem for not only IT and the OT side, right? So, traditionally in all aspects, you've had a lot of this IT tooling out there that started to make its inroads into the OT environment, right? Because it's just another tool, same propagation tactics as far as trying to make sure to roll it out and things of that nature. But they didn't really make the segmentation as far as the different tool sets between the IT and the OT side. So I think, what was it? It was speaking in the Aspen Security Forum, July 19th. There was Deputy National Security Advisor Ann Neuberger and Secretary of State Anthony Bilkin. They were talking about we need to really think about our digital resilience, not just in the systems we run, but in the globally connected security systems. So the risk is consolidation, how we deal with that consolidation, how we ensure that if an incident does occur, it can be contained and we can recover quickly. So that containment and having your different tool sets between your OT and your IT environments for making that differentiation out there, kind of knowing what your tool sets are doing out there. So, there's a lot of business cases for like the risk analysis on your OT and your IT side. So, we all know that, typically your OT environments are kind of this gooey center of a hard candy exterior, right? When you're trying to get into them, right? Or at least that's what we try to typically carve out. But typically on the IT side is where it's, hammer down with all these other different tool sets out there because, what's your normal ingress into the OT world? You got to get through the IT world first before you get in the OT world. At least should be anyway, right?
Most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time. We've seen segmentation. Yeah. Right. I know we've walked into plants and everything like that where you have like everything's on the same flat network and you're just like, oh boy, guys.
So that never happens.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. What's a multi-home machine? Yeah.
It comes with a little bit of credence there. You've got an entire industry that's still grappling with the idea of segmentation. And, they were just kind of thrown into this extra added caveat of IT tools, to help kind of dominate the security posture, everything like that. And instead of taking like a little bit of a pragmatic approach as far as, trying to isolate them out and things of that nature too. So you've got a lot of flux out there within the industry, trying to get these OT segmentation off and all that. But, typically like your main entry point is through the IT side. So having all that good monitoring on IT side and everything like that is predominantly the best practice there because then you can at least monitor and everything like that, making sure nobody's trying to do a lateral into your OT to do any type of malicious activity or whatnot, right? It's like getting that bad email and then everything's on a flat network and then, oh, hey, by the way, all these other devices will act as Windows devices and guess what? Now they're all infected too.
Yep. And it's, the other problem too is, I don't know if I made the joke on the podcast before, but I'm pretty sure both of you have probably heard the, compliance is not security. Security is not compliance. And but there's a lot of confusion. Not confusion. Confusion is the wrong word. But there's a lot of instances where they still end up being conflated, and, it's not really a surprise that some of the industries that were more heavily impacted by this are also the ones that were more heavily subject to regulation. Think about airlines, right? Because, this, and not that, this isn't security software. It is. And under normal operating circumstances, it's very good security software that actually approaches the issue of security in a very clever way that, based on some pen testers I've known, they don't always like going up against things like CrowdStrike Falcon because it does make their job harder. And that's, those are all good things. But it's also, it's a checkbox. That's, it's also kind of interesting that, a lot of the reasons why, there's also like other regulatory pressures, especially from Europe, which have sort of led to the situation where third-party security vendors can have essentially full kernel access in Windows. But, like you mentioned at the outset, Ryan, Apple devices don't have to give that same kernel level access, even though they're running ostensibly the same software.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like a bunch of people that don't understand the topic are making these compliance items. That's a whole nother podcast though, but
and that's
right.
It's interesting that the angle that I wanted to take coming in on this though is, I was still working with some clients on Friday. We had, clients who weren't impacted by it, or at least the chunk of their organization that I was working with wasn't impacted by it. But I was getting a lot of very particular questions,
Right.
So how does the Verve software update? Does it auto update? How do the drivers update? Do they auto update? What about BigFix? All of our components, they were questioning. It's like, what is the actual process by which we go about applying updates? And I mean, fortunately, I can, because we're primarily serving the OT space, and we're coming from OT backgrounds a lot of the time, and the software was developed by people with a lot of knowledge of how things are in OT. Yeah, I'm able to say, no. We don't auto anything. We don't automatically update our stuff. You want to download a driver update, like you got to click at least 2 different things. Like everything is confirmed. And even if like BigFix is automatically downloading the little fixlets, those fixlets don't automatically light themselves off. They'll evaluate, they'll figure out if they apply to any endpoint, but then the actual like, oh, okay, I need to now, I want to push out this update, or I want to apply this settings change or whatever else. That is manual all the way. You actually have to log in and like click on a thing and tell it to take the action and select which computers you want to apply the action to. And so there's multiple steps where you as the user have to intervene and confirm the action. And that's the way it should be in an OT setup, because, you're, the level of sensitivity and the potential impact of doing something that goes bad, very, very high. And most of the people working in OT recognize this and know this, at least the ones who've been doing it for a while and who are boots on the ground on the plant floor and on the shop floor. They kind of understand this, and that's good. But of course, they're nervous about it because maybe they're a new customer of ours. They don't necessarily know us and how we're thinking about it. So of course, they're asking, is this how you do things, or is this not how you do things? And, fortunately, we can say to them, absolutely, we are not in the position of doing anything automatic. We're not in the position of doing anything that pushes a life-altering configuration to an endpoint, unless you're utilizing that one component of our software to do your updating. But even then, not all of our clients do. But
yeah, well, it's always the age-old thing where, you got an incident out there, it's going to snowball out too. Like, I mean, look at the solar winds thing that happened with the logging mechanism and what was that? It was like a credentials in there that was like, burned into the software where you get to like just laterally into it and all that stuff. So it's a lot of little things like that. And, you're ever going to be into that point of where any type of incident that happens out there, you're going to start getting questioned, based on that other vendor performance out there all the time too. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of a nature of the dynamic of the industry that we're in. Everybody wants to have some type of assurance, like, are you going to make the same mistake that this guy did over here? Well, no. We've been doing more of this space over here for much longer, and we've kind of know some of the caveats they're trying to look for on that. Mm-hmm. The EDRs and things of that nature, where they're doing like the more kind of almost bare metal detection of things to do the interjection of the OS and things of that nature. It's not really new or novel or anything like that, but I think people are getting a lot more aggressive out there with those types of dynamics. And, sometimes that gets a little sketchy, but that's the chosen path that they went for to, try to build a more secure environment, right?
I was going to kind of chime in on something you had mentioned, Ken, which was about the impact that these types of things have. And a lot of people, even myself included sometimes, right, when we see plants day in and day out, we always forget about human risk, right, related to operating facilities, right? I mean, there's, a cyber attack or even a misconfiguration like what happened, last week. It does have the potential to injure, possibly kill somebody, right? If a piece of machine gets misoperated or, lose some data. Obviously, with what happened, it's relatively low with the types of devices that are that were affected. But a lot of people you got to think about in the OT space where there's people, right, that are using these machines or are relying on the safety of endpoints, and of those different machinery that's there, around this. And that's kind of another piece of the cyber side and why we do things in OT a different way than we typically see in IT, is mainly because of that, right? From a safety perspective.
It's kind of
non-malicious user error type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that because, I just thought of like this weird analogy, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'll put it out there anyways, and you guys can dissect it a bit. But like, especially if you think about something like a safety system, right? You have some sort of safety instrumented system, SIS, which is supposed to be, in a way, it's a controller like any other, but it serves one very specific purpose, right? And its purpose is to, monitor the process closely. And when it detects certain predefined alert conditions, it intervenes to do something to arrest the process, whatever it is, to prevent, something bad from happening. Let's say an overpressure and blowout, for example, right? Now, you can do that with an SIS. You can have some kind of like overpressure valve, right? Which puts a physical control that in theory serves the same purpose on the system. The question is, which one would you have? Would you replace one with the other, or is both the better option? And I kind of see, like I say, in my head, there's a bit of a parallel here because like on the one hand, you want, especially in the realm of, security software, and especially, given how nasty some of the malware that's out there now has become, and how quick it can act, you do want something that's responsive and able to rapidly intervene, sort of up to the second. But at the same time, do you still want to have some sort of other like intervention or control in place to be just like, okay, but, I absolutely want, my up to the minute updates, but I don't necessarily, want to put my entire fleet on update. I want to, it's the testing question, really, is what it is. It's like, and I mean, we get that one all the time too, right? It's like, well, do we have to roll this all out everywhere all at once? Well, no, like, I mean, we can designate, if you have a test environment, great, good for you. Not everybody does. But if not, then staged rollouts are your friend. Because you can push it out to a couple of things. And if those things fall over, then you can not push it out to the rest of the things. And once you figured out why the couple things fell over, then we can, revisit the question of rolling out the update. But that, that does get in the way of having this sort of automated, up to the moment, responsive capability. But it's like, it's a pendulum swing, right? Because like on the one hand, you're like, well, okay, if we do it all manually, then, and we know this, if you just leave it completely manual, everybody defers their updates. Everybody waits until the icon in the corner of Chrome turns bright blinking red before they'll bother pushing update. But on the other hand, if you force the issue and everything is automated all the time, well, things can break because there is some virtue to the testing and the deferment and the taking it not snail's pace slow, but with a little bit of caution because it's all software, it's all written by people, and sometimes there are bugs.
Yep, features.
Features. Not a bug, it's feature. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, I think that kind of comes down into your facilities. You were talking about the staging of updates and things of that nature. I've come into multiple different areas where, there are automated updates, but then we'll push to like a small subsegment that is a test group. And then usually those are the ones that are, and I'm not trying to label anybody out there because we love our users, but it's usually the people that are, more affirmative and to responding, like if there's anything that's messed up or something like that. So the ones that are going to be more boisterous about something that's not quite right, so it's rolling out to those test groups and, letting it cook for a few days to see if anything, happens or whatnot. And then, if you don't get any type of gripes or complaints for that test group, maybe you have it set up as an automated facility. The first test group gets it for 5 days to, kick the tires on it or whatnot. And then if there's nobody complaining within that test group, the automation just go ahead and push it out to the rest of the organization as well. Or maybe you have two test groups. So you have a primary test group, a secondary test group, and then it goes out to the rest of the organization. So, I think there's a lot of credence with doing things that way because it just kind of creeps it into the organization. So if you're like a large admin with like 15,000 different users out there, that gives you a little bit more warranty and the updates to make sure that they're not going to wreak total havoc within your entire ecosystem as well. I know that this wasn't particularly in the case because it wasn't really designated as, something that would be, as dangerous as what it was. But, I think as traditionally people are trying to make sure, how can we make this, if I'm an admin over 15,000 devices, I don't want to push something out there that's going to wreak total havoc on 15,000 devices that I then have to go fix. If I can get it condensed down to maybe a group of 20 people that's real to close proximity of me, and then I can put the kibosh on the rest of the rollout out there until there's a fix on it. Yeah, guess what I'm going to do?
Mm-hmm. Yep. 100% agree with you, Tyler. Yeah, you see it, right? We deal in NERC SIP compliance a lot, and that's how patching is basically done, right? We review things. We're never on the bleeding edge in OT. We're trying to keep the museum running, and so we're always going to be reviewing patches on a monthly or outage based basis, like some of our power customers do, right? They only patch every outage, and so just having that mechanism in place is one of the best approaches, like you said, in the test, like at least even if it's not a fully dedicated test environment, because I can probably count on one hand how many of our customers actually have a full test environment that's identical to their production. But having some designated systems that aren't necessarily completely critical to the process to test on those updates, that's going to definitely save you a lot of headache in the long run, even if it does mean you have to click a few extra buttons here and there.
Yep.
Give you peace of mind out there, right?
Mm-hmm. Everybody knows we need that.
I think it's also, a good lesson coming back to something else I said, right? Because this wasn't a one-stage error that happened, right? There was a two-stage error. There was something in the program that, and I've written enough C and C# code over the years to know that it's not always, you try to do all your exception catching as best you can, but we're all only human. And yeah, sometimes, you miss a situation where there's the potential risk for some kind of exception to be thrown, and you don't adequately do exception handling in that portion of your code. And that was this, right? Like there was a situation in which a null pointer exception could be thrown under the right circumstances. The right circumstances were exceedingly rare, but they were there. And there wasn't an exception handler in place to catch that. But the circumstances were rare. And so this ticked along for goodness knows how long in the driver. But then all of a sudden, on Friday, a little update file, which was supposed to just tune and optimize things a bit, got pushed out, which provided the second part, the data or lack of data that would cause a null pointer situation to emerge in the code that was processing the file. And that's what brought everything to a screeching halt. And, that's the other, that is also something that I think we really need to, be mindful of in the OT space. And, generally we are, is that individually components can be fine for your environment, but do they play nicely together? And usually the answer is yes, but sometimes the answer is, well, so.
That's the ever-ending unicorn out there, right? What I think the never-ending unicorn is trying to, everybody is trying to find that consolidated tool set where, and generally, most of the time, the IT folks just want to be helpful with the OT folks, right? Because a lot of it is a lot of the same tooling that they're doing in the IT environment, right? There's a significant more pucker power on the OT side because you're controlling rotating machinery and things of that nature. So they're a little less resilient on it because they want to be able to do, that very, very, very high availability of items that are out there. And it just makes things a little bit more contentious around it, right? So it's just trying to find that right mix of tool set that is going to not be as detrimental to the OT side for little things out there or has not that big of an impact. But you really don't know until you have an incident, like last Friday, on what those tool sets actually are, right? And then kind of like what I was saying earlier, is that consolidation of tool sets. Do you really want to put all your eggs in one basket for across the board for all your systems, whether they're IT or OT, and then being able to have that visibility into them? So I don't know. I think this is going to drive a lot of different decisions out there as far as, how they manage their IT versus OT, to make sure that they, could very potentially have different tool sets versus their IT to their OT side, and doing other measures than they would typically have on their IT side. And I could be wrong, because there's a lot of crossover on the needs on both sides of the camp there too.
Yep.
Well,
I know.
Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was just going to say, I know that, one thing that's going to come out of this is, a lot of our OT listeners are going to be, doing that questioning now, right? I mean, when you're getting a demo for, something like a CrowdStrike or any other tool that's out there, right? You're relying on them kind of understanding what's going on in your environment, right? But if it's, strictly built around the IT side, you're trying to adopt into OT, there's these other, questions that we need to, ask and understand. And is that, like you said, Tyler, the, having different tools, right? Or if we are putting, our eggs in one basket, how can we ensure the safety of the OT side and its endpoints, if something were to happen to it on IT?
Well, it's funny because that's actually a point that's related to a point that Rick made in like the last episode, which is that at the end of the day, you have, especially in an OT environment, you have all of these different vendors coming in and they all have their own products and solutions and requirements. But you, the plant operator, the plant engineer, the NERC SIP technical contact, whoever you are, like ultimately you're the one who's getting the 2 a.m. phone call. Nobody's calling your local, nobody's calling your integrator at 2 a.m. You might be calling your integrator at 2:30 a.m. when you finally get to the plant floor, but the integrator is not the first call. The software deployment guy from, your EDR vendor is not the first call. You are the first call. And so, when you're seeing all of these demos and you're having these, you should absolutely be asking questions. And I mean, Rick even went a step further and, said, you should be able to put your foot down a little bit and say, this is, if we are going this route, then, I need this, and this. Like you should, because you are the one who's going to be getting that call when things break. And you're also the one who, at least initially, the people who who pay you and determine your future with the company, you are going to be in their crosshairs until such time as, a little bit of the dust has settled on what has happened. And so, you absolutely should ask questions. You should be able to ask questions and maybe even, be able to say, okay, well, if this is going into the environment, then this, and this, maybe one day we're going to have discussions about deploying CrowdStrike into OT environments or something similar, right? Some kind of kernel-level behavioral analytics EDR solution. Maybe we're going to see that deployed into OT environments one day.
Yeah.
I find that a little bit scary, but if that day should
I'm
come,
shuddering over here a little bit.
Right? But if that day should come, then we should absolutely, plant operators and us and everybody else who has to deal with that on the front lines, should absolutely be able to say, okay, but if this is going in, like no automatic rollouts.
Right. Absolutely.
It's it should be absolutely reasonable to have that conversation and be the one to put that into the conversation. Just like, all right, but in this environment, we can't do it the way they do it on the internet facing side of house. We have to do it differently, because it's, the alternative is we blue screen the entire plant and all of a sudden, 3,000 megawatts drops off the grid.
Right. Yeah.
Take a pick.
Destroy a turbine or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen. No. It's interesting. The amount of times we see those, the IT folks leading those types of conversations where, you really got to get the folks involved that, work with the actual environment day in and day out. I'm not saying that IT shouldn't be involved, by the way. I mean, Tyler, you and I have always heard the IT versus OT arguments and fighting, but, in my experience, our customers that have a good relationship with their IT side are usually the most robust and most secure environments, because they, are the OT guys, like all of us that have grew up in OT, the subset of those people that really understand cyber and OT versus just how OT systems work is much smaller than the amount of people in the IT side that understand cybersecurity. And so there is a lot of knowledge sharing that can occur between the two environments, but you also have to go into it knowing that, that environment is different, but I'm here to provide help and support if you need it. So sorry, a little tangent, but something that I thought was worth bringing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Have to be able to advocate a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, there's not many unicorns out there that have that full breadth of knowledge across the gambit there. So that is 100% too. So, I mean, you can almost tell when you walk in and you start talking to the controls engineers and things of that nature, because a lot of those systems, they're still running on like Windows XP or something like that, hopefully not, but, but there's a lot of other things that kind of underpin that, it's like, well, you guys need to get off of Windows XP. Well, that creates a multi-million-dollar DCS upgrade. Well, maybe not,
yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. Working museums.
Exactly.
When's the last time you've seen an NT system, Tyler?
Actually, I think it was here.
So yeah, they just never go away.
Right? Well, so to be fair, remember the last site we were at and somebody was showing us a picture of like a Windows 3.1 system out there?
Yeah.
I was like, get out.
No way. How can you even find hardware that still runs on? That's the more impressive piece of it, but
eBay.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I made that joke on episodes before too. What's your backup plan? Well, eBay.
Yeah.
I've had that conversation. Like I've literally had someone tell me that to my face.
Well, there was a plant I was at that they had a certain system that had 3 identical systems that were MS-DOS systems that controlled some older PLCs. And I was like, well, what happens when one of those breaks down? Oh, I've got 3 more in the closet we can stick on there. Okay. At least you got a plan.
This is going back years, but I actually had a client that was running DOSBox. For that reason.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of their enterprising operators had also slapped a couple of Sierra games onto the same system, but for that reason.
It runs Doom.
Yeah, right.
and also my PLC software, but more important.
Wow.
One day the Linux PLCs will run Doom somehow.
Well,
I could see you making that happen, Ryan.
if you can run it on an array of potatoes, you can run it on. Yeah. Someone will make it work for VxWorks. Promise you.
Yeah. One day.
Yeah. But
I just, one thing I do want to just point out, just since we're kind of, we're on this topic of the IT/OT, it's really, back again to risk, right? At Verve, we always talk about risk and looking at risk, but I mean, even myself, I would never even have thought to look at what does the risk that a cyber tool, that is supposed to reduce risk, what risk does it bring with it, right? That's another kind of off the wall paradox there. And this is, one of those situations, right? It didn't actually cause a malicious risk per se. But, is there a risk to bringing something in? That kind of, points back to what you were saying about putting your foot down in these conversations as the OT guy that's going to get that 2 a.m. phone call. Just kind of, you got to expand a little bit on, what is risk and what actually, how does it affect me?
Well, you have to kind of, you have to be able to, process out certain, like whenever you're talking about anything kernel level, like there is a heightened risk there because, you are at like the lowest level of the OS and important stuff happens down there and you can do a lot of important stuff down there. But if something goes wrong, it takes the whole OS down with it. It's not just Word crashing to desktop. It's the desktop crashing to whatever's underneath it.
Yep.
And I mean, it's funny to me too, because, I've been a gamer most of my life and like we have these arguments all the time, right? Every time, like, whether it's Valorant or like, I don't even know what, right? Anti-cheat systems have been a thing in games for a long, long time. And like when Valorant came out, there was a huge argument over the fact that its anti-cheat system was, what's that magical phrase? A kernel-level driver.
Mhm.
You know, and people were very, very up in arms in the gaming community about giving an anti-cheat system, so something with the ability to do a lot of data reads in memory, kernel level access to the system. Because how do you know it's just keeping an eye on what the game is doing, right? Slightly different concern. That's more of an information disclosure concern, but still, you know, like this was, you know, these are arguments that have been had before in other contexts, but you know, now we're seeing it on the side of security software.
And I'm feeling an old phrase coming in, you know, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, well, it does.
Yep.
It absolutely does. And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, hopefully this is sort of a, you know, in my ideal world, the outcome of this would be that, you know, anybody who is doing kernel level work, whether that's, you know, first party OS vendors or the third party security vendors, will build a bit more of a testing process or expand the testing process they already have just to make sure. I don't know if that will actually happen. It's the hope that I have, but at the very least, I mean, this does underscore, I think, the need for being able to do a little bit more staging in terms of rolling out even what seem like benign updates before pushing them, you know, broadly across your organization. Because, you know, yeah, it's better to blue screen 10 PCs than it is to blue screen 1,000.
Yep. Or 8 million
all day.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you kind of think about it from, you know, that 10,000 foot view, the question that I posed to myself at one time is, you know, what does this tell nation states, right? Or even really hacktivists, hackers, anybody that has the one to cause disruption, you know. I mean, how many Fortune 100 companies was it that was affected? It was like half of them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's global reach, right? So now you have this, you know, new avenue. I mean, not necessarily new, right? Everybody knows about, you know, kernel level, you know, issues and things like that. But, you know, if it's a piece of software, right, that has that access, you know, how do we protect against supply chain attacks on that, right? And protecting source and, you know, all those things, right? So kind of any day now, the government's going to be involved. So it's, I already saw that, what's his name was getting called in to, you know, have a chat. So,
yeah.
Oh, it's already cooking. We already know that. It's already cooking.
Congress has lately really been, your Congress has really lately been keen to interview luminaries of the tech industry. Just ask all the social media guys. So, yeah, we'll see how that shakes out. But
yeah, won't be answering that phone call anytime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, guys.
All right. Well, I do have to wrap it up because I've got busy Wednesday ahead. You would think that Wednesday afternoon would be like when things quiet down, but it's actually when they tick up even more. So there you go. But
happy hump day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's a high peak in my case, but that's okay. Well, big thanks, Tyler, for, you know, chiming in, and for Ryan for suggesting the topic, because I mean, I know I got lots of questions about it. I can only assume that you both have fielded a few questions about it from other anxious clients as well. Yep. And, you know, I do think it is good to be able to say, you know, specifically from a Verve context, but, you know, just, and I would hope this is true in the cases of most, you know, OT facing service providers as well. It's just, yeah, no, we do not, you know, we don't do anything automatically. Everything is, you know, it's all confirmation prompts. It's all manually triggered, and you can do it in small batches. You can, you know, test it, because that is definitely, especially when it comes to, you know, the OT side and the infrastructure side, that's really the only approach that you can take. Because it's, you know, as we see, it's very easy for one of these things for something automated to go sideways, and it's bad enough when that, you know, takes down an airline, but when that starts taking down power plants and water treatment facilities, that is a whole different level of problem. It affects over and above the fact that I can't just get on my plane.
Right.
Or Delta.
Yeah. I think they're still struggling.
They
And I heard
are.
that-
That's what I heard from today. Yeah,
Yeah,
that they're
I heard
still
that
trying to.
Southwest was saved because they're still running like XP or something ridiculous.
Oh
They're
gosh.
running some kind of backdated
Jesus.
system. There was a meme that
Right.
took off that they were running like Windows 3.1, which turned out to not be true, but like they're running some kind of backdated system that, didn't, couldn't even, run CrowdStrike, let alone pull an update for it. But, as a result, all their services did stay up. Now that's another episode right there. Is
Right.
just, okay, well, is that an argument for using legacy and keeping legacy going forever? No, it is not. Absolutely not. It's still a bad idea. It just, in this one particular instance, it did come through.
Right. 1 in a million.
Yeah. But, that's not to say that you should keep your NT4 box ticking along, because it's not going to have that kind of kernel level interruption. There are other problems with your NT4
That's a whole
box.
episode on its own right there. More than 5. NT4
Yeah.
saves the world.
Please
One
no.
floppy disk at a time.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking part. Thank you out there for listening. This has been OT After Hours, a podcast about industrial cybersecurity, why it matters, and all the challenges that it presents.